to stores to print out? I think it'd
We
be a
should.
good idea.
We should. What?
I think you should. I think you should make it available.
Oh, it's okay. If I think we can work this out, I think we'll be golden. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Let me see if I can invite Tammy now. My heart stops every time we do it live, I swear. Okay. She's connecting.
Yay!
I think we're golden. Awesome.
Okay, let me go run and turn on my lights real quick because it got really dark all of a sudden.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, now we are rolling. Thank you so much
Are we
for
back?
everybody's patience. Technology is both a blessing and a curse.
Amen. When you think that we can talk to each other all the way around the world, I guess we have to expect that sometimes it's not going to be seamless and be amazed how often it is seamless.
Right. I guess let's just take that for granted that it's going to work. And then when it doesn't work, I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean I won't connect?
Yeah, I just told them I'm sure glad you guys know what you're doing because it's all Greek to me. And Trevor said, right now I think I'd prefer.
Right. I'm sitting here looking at it. I'm a pretty decent techie, and I'm like looking at this going, I don't know what the problem is. So the
Well,
last question I think we left off on is your favorite bag pattern.
yes, and you said mine or someone else's, and I have to confess that I've never made a bag using anyone else's patterns besides my own. So I can't give you any information there, although I've seen a lot of bags that I really love. And I know swirl
Hmm.
patterns are especially popular. One of these days I need to try one. My problem is time. There's just not enough time to do what I have to do and play too. Fortunately for me, sewing is my hobby as well as my business. So it keeps me very busy and I don't have much downtime that's not business related. But my favorite pattern, I don't have just one. And so while you guys were doing that, I went and gathered three of my favorites, each of which is kind of a different purpose. This little bag is called On the Go, and this is the bag that not the one, but this pattern is the one that I carry all the time. I love this because it carries everything I need and nothing else. So it doesn't get heavy, it doesn't wear down my shoulder, and it's just nice and convenient. It's got a pocket here that if I go to a trade show, I can put my name tag in there. Usually when I'm at home, my grocery list goes in there because if I don't see it, I forget it. So my to-do list is usually in that pocket to remind me of what I need to do. And then there's another pocket on the outside where I put receipts and coins and things like that. There's a deep pocket on the back where my phone goes and my car keys. So those are always easy to access. And then the flap lifts up. I love this when I travel because I can put my credit card and my driver's license here. And when I go through security, I just have to flap that over. I don't have to dig anything out and I can show them that. When I'm shopping, usually I put my credit card and my Costco card in there just so I'm not digging around trying to find them. And then there's a nice deep opening here with pockets where I usually keep business cards and small cards like that, loyalty cards, and plenty of room inside for my wallet, pens and pencils, all the extra little things that I need to carry. I love it because, again, it just doesn't get heavy and it's compact. The strap adjusts so that I can wear it crossbody or over my shoulder. And this pattern is called On the Go. We're going to hopefully before spring update this. I found that a 1/2 inch strap is not as comfortable as a little wider strap. So we're going to redo this so that it has a 1.5 inch strap on it. And the one that I carry every day has that. And I found I really like that better. But that's a fun one. So that's my everyday bag favorite. But if I'm traveling, I of course need a bigger bag. So my
Wow.
favorite travel bag is our ultimate travel bag. And this is a super easy bag to make. I've had lots of people make this bag who've never even sewn before, much less made a bag. And it's a fun one to do. But it's got a nice deep slip pocket in the front, zippered pocket. When I travel and drive to the airport, my car keys always go here. So they stay zipped up during my whole trip. And when I come home, I know right where to find them. There's another pocket on the back, a nice deep one, and then a trolley sleeve. So you can hook this over the handles on your rolling luggage and not have to carry it. It's got short handles that I can wear over my shoulder or a longer strap so you can wear it crossbody, and that detaches if you want. And then inside, it's just got a ton of room. I don't have the base stabilizer in the base, but you've got a slip pocket on one side and a full zippered mesh pocket on the other side. So usually I put my computer in there and my phone charger and all the things that I need to get there. And then you've got all the inside open for your book and your extra set of clothes and your travel pillow and your sweater and all those kinds of things. But it's just a really handy bag and probably one of our best-selling patterns. So that one is called Ultimate Travel. Now, if I'm traveling, I love that one too. If I'm going somewhere where I need to take supplies, my favorite has always been our A Place for Everything. And this is a little sneak peek for you guys. This is a new version of that pattern. So this is A Place for Everything 2.0, which will be released in January. We made this one using Tula Pink's new Curiouser and Curiouser fabric, which I think turned out really fun. But this bag is what you take all your sewing supplies in. So we've got this one packed, ready to go to a retreat. So it's got pages that you can lift this out and your pages come out and you can stand them up wherever you're working. So pockets front and back, and you can do all different styles of pockets. So we've got tons of thread in here, patterns on the back. So we did mesh pockets on the back and vinyl pockets on the front so you could see things. And then there's nice pockets on each side here so you can put a small cutting mat. This is Olfa's pressing and cutting mat. And then you've got an optional carrying strap that you can carry it over your shoulder. So that's a fabulous one if you want to carry all your supplies with you or just store them at home and have a nice compact way to store them.
I love that. It's just so, innovative in a bag, and that I've not seen the, pages kind of come out like that, and you're able to put all your thread in there, and with the vinyl you can or the mesh, you can actually see through it, so you're not like, is that the black one, or do I have to unzip 5 other pockets to find it?
The original version of this pattern had Velcro on the back of each of the pages and Velcro in here so that the pages Velcroed in. But it was designed so that you carried it from this side. So you really had to have them Velcroed in because if you forgot to zip it, everything would fall out. So that was one of the major changes we did is we turned it and changed the handles so that when you carry it, it doesn't matter if it's zipped shut, nothing's going to fall out. So that enabled us to eliminate the Velcro on the back and just put this little strap to hold them in. And it also, the other thing we eliminated, the original pattern had pleats folded in the pocket. And we did a little survey from our customers and said, we're thinking about updating this. What do you wish it had? What would you change? And a lot of people said, I hate doing those pleats, but I do them because I need them. One of the persons who said that was Tula Pink. And she said, I always do them. They're so important because I need them so I could get all my thread in. And of course, I agreed with her, but my pattern development team said, I don't think it's really necessary. So we had to make pages with and without, and they proved to me that you can get exactly the same amount of stuff in those pockets without the pleats and a whole lot less work. So that was kind of a fun adventure that I'm not sure I would have done on my own had they not been so forceful in their
I was going to
convincing.
say inspirational, but that works.
Yeah, and then of course we added pockets on the back, a pocket on the front, because you can never have enough pockets. So this bag carries everything in the kitchen sink.
That's an amazing bag. And thank you for noting that it's going to be updated. So I'll have to wait until January to get the most updated one.
Yeah, I definitely would, and we took a video to go with it, so it's going to be worth waiting for.
Okay, so I'm sure multiple people would like to know, what sewing machine or machines do you personally use?
I sew on Berninas. I have been a Bernina girl. I grew up, my mom had a singer, an old singer, and that's what I learned to sew on. But when I got married in 1973, so I don't even know how many years ago that is, a long time ago, I said, I need a sewing machine. And very fortunately, the first store we went to was a Bernina dealership, and I bought a Bernina. And I have loved Berninas ever since then. And I'm so grateful that I bought that machine because I could have ended up with anything. And what I love about Berninas is they go through lots and lots of layers with ease. They can handle anything you give. They have such a strong motor. And I love how easy their feet are to put on and off. I haven't found another one. I actually bought a small a Janome Gem, and a Janome 6600 because I got a really great deal at a show. And I thought, oh, this will be perfect to have to take to class. And this one will be great because it does alphabets. I want it to be able to do alphabets on things. I probably sewed on that big machine 20 hours. And what I didn't like about it was having to unscrew the feet. And it's funny, I mean, it's not that big a deal, but when you're used to being able to just click it on and off, I just couldn't get used to it. So even though I had those, I bought a FOF because one of the gals for me, that's what she always sewed on. And so I bought one of those so she'd have a machine she was comfortable with. And I've probably sewn 5 or 10 hours on that. Even though I had these really nice machines with a lot more features than the old Bernina I had, I went back to the Bernina all the time because I was used to the feet and I was used to the system and it did everything I want. So I sew now on a Bernina 530 the majority of the time. It's not the top of the line machine. It doesn't have a great big throat, but it does everything I want. And I actually have a 790 plus, and I rarely sew on it because it's just more finicky to me. And the wider foot gets in the way of how I'm used to sewing. And so I like the narrower, and it just works well for me. So Bernina.
Wonderful. I have
I
actually
also
not.
have sewed on a Juki, and I love the Juki. It goes really fast, and I love the thread cutter on it. That's one thing. If my Bernina had a thread cutter, it'd be like the best machine in the world. And I have a couple of Jukis here because some of my staff really likes those because they're so fast. So I've sewn on a lot of different ones, but Bernina still has a special place in my heart.
Thank you. So, next question. What brand of sewing scissors do you prefer?
You know, I don't use scissors very often. I mostly do everything with rotary cutter, and I don't know that you'd call these scissors, but these little snippers that curve up, I use all the time. I use these to clip threads and cut loose threads off of things. So and I don't know what the brand is, but we carry these on our website. Those are fabulous. But I just bought a new pair of Kai scissors. I had an older pair and I absolutely love those. So these are the Kai B5165. I love these because they have a serrated edge, so they really grab your fabric and they're sharp all the way to the tip and really strong. You can go through lots and lots of layers with them. I don't have them here. We've been doing B-roll today, and so my tools have kind of been put in bags and they're all over the place. But I have a nice, like this long pair of kind of shaped like these, but they're gingers. and they're really strong and sturdy, and I also really like those. So Ginger and Kai probably would be my favorites.
Okay, so you mentioned you love rotary cutters. How about rotary cutters? What's your favorite?
I love the Olfa rotary cutter, and the reason I love this one is it fits my hand really well. I find it really comfortable to hold, and I love how easy it is to change the blade. You just pull down on this and your blade pops out and you can change it. So super simple and easy, and not those older Olfas, like probably like this one, that have all the pieces in between there. I'm never positive if I get it put back together. This one actually may be the newer one, but these are super simple and easy to do, and they come in lots of fun colors. So I usually have one of every color in my bag. If I'm doing something really small, this is one of the older style where you have all the pieces that you have to put back together. So not nearly as easy to change as this newer one. And I pretty much always use the 45 for pretty much everything. A lot of my staff prefer the 60 millimeter, but it's just a little bit too big for most of what I do. If I'm cutting out several layers of something, I like that one, but this is my favorite.
Okay, thank you. Beth had a question, and I've noticed there's a little bit of chatter about binding in the comments. So verbatim, this is Beth's note. I noticed that your patterns use a lot of binding, but my binding game is weak. Do you have any tips to improve, or is it just practice, practice, and more practice?
I have some tips, but it's also practice. And I do use a lot of bindings, and there's several reasons for that. First of all, I do not like loose linings on bags. I would much rather have my lining fabric and my main fabric quilted together so that they're one piece. And the only way you can finish edges, if you've done that, is by putting a binding on it, because unless you add another layer of fabric, you can't sew around the edges and turn it right side out. So that was kind of where I got started using bindings. I also like bindings because I think they give really good support to a bag. So if you look at this little bag, if this wasn't bound on the edges, I don't think it would have nearly the same stability and structure as the binding gives it. So the binding becomes a really integral part of the skeleton of the bag for me. So the best tips that I can give you is make your own binding. Do not buy pre-made bias binding, because it's not going to be the same quality. You're not going to be able to find it to match your project. And it's just not going to be the same. It's probably not going to be the right width either. So I've got some tips. I happen to have my step outs here. Let me grab a few things out of my bag here. So it's been a while since I've done demos. I kind of missed going to shows and being able to show stuff. So I had to dig around and find out where I put all my stuff. But one thing that I do is I use a straight grain binding anytime I'm binding something on a straight edge. So like here, where I bound the top of the zipper, or here the top of the or here the top of the bag, here the top of the pocket. All of those are just a straight grain piece of fabric. And I cut those 2 inches wide. I fold them in half with the right sides out, bring the long raw edges together, and I do not press them. I just pin them to hold them together. That was a tip that I learned in the very first quilting class that I ever taught. I was teaching how to make one of my purses or bags, and I was complaining that occasionally when I turn the binding around to the front, I get wrinkles in it, and I wasn't happy with how it looked. And one of the ladies in the class said, well, how did you prepare your binding? And I said, I told her what I did. And she said, did you press it? And I said, oh, yes, I was really careful to press it. And she said, well, that's your problem. If you would skip pressing it, you won't have that problem. And what, it made sense to me after I thought about it, because you know how when you're sewing, your fabrics don't all move at the same rate. And if you've got the one on top moving a little bit different from the one on bottom, you're going to end up with your fabric a little bit crooked. And when you fold it over, if you've got that sharp crease pressed in there, it's not going to fold over and lay as nice and flat. So from that day forward, I have never pressed another binding, and it really does make a huge difference. The other thing that I do when bindings, and I don't see, I should have checked these to make sure that everything I need was in here, but this will be close. So this is basically what I do. I sew my seam and then I fold it over, bring it around to the front and stitch along the edge. So my binding's folded in half, I've sewn it, and when I bring it over, I'm sewing along the folded edge. The other really nice thing about that is you've got a double layer of fabric there, so your binding's gonna last a whole lot longer. So it is a two-step process. Sew it on the back first, bring it around to the front and stitch it down. When I do that, my goal is that, I'm going to pull this one out. So this is a step out that I did for a class quite a while ago, but it gives you kind of a good ability to see what I'm talking about. So I've got my binding that I've aligned on the edge. So I've aligned the raw edges of the binding with the raw edges of my bag. And I'm sewing along here with a 1/4 inch seam. You're trying to keep the raw edges of your fabric even with the raw edges of your bag. You're trying to keep your foot so it's running parallel and not going crooked either way. And you're trying to sew a really accurate 1/4 inch seam. And I always tell people, if you can't do all of that, don't worry so much about the accurate 1/4 inch seam so long as you're going less than a 1/4 inch, because you can always go back and refine it. So interestingly, when I sew bindings on, I try to get them on right the first time around. And I always think, yeah, I did it. That was a really accurate 1/4 inch seam. But after I get it sewn on, I will turn it over to the other side and check it. And my goal is that this folded edge of the binding falls just past this line of stitching where I attached it, which actually that's pretty good right there. If it goes too far over, like if it came here, when I sewed through that, that line of stitching would end up way out here, and that wouldn't look good. If it doesn't go far enough, like if it goes there, then I see my line of stitching here. So my goal is that it falls out just past that, so that when I stitch along here, so let's look on here, when I stitch along here, it falls out in the same place on the other side. And you can see we did that pretty well. Here it goes a little bit in, but for the most part, and the other thing I tell people is, it's a bag, it's a purse, you're not entering in a contest, and if it's not absolutely perfect, well, you're going to try to do better next time. But it's, it's not something to royally stress about, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. So the first thing I do is always fold it over, check it, and then I usually always have to go back and what I call refine my stitching. So I just go back around. Well, that's going to be really easy the second time around because it's already attached. I'm not having to pay attention to my pinned binding or keeping the edges even. That's all done. Now I can just concentrate on the 1/4 inch seam. And then I turn that to the front, stitch down, and I'm done. If you need practice on that, we have a series of free patterns on our website that are part of our ByAnnie Basics series. There's at least 4 projects. We're adding more all the time. The first one, you learn to make this little basket. It's called Petit Four Basket. But then there's 3 different projects. This one, which is called Peacekeeper, where you make just a simple bag that you can put your project pieces in. So you do a binding on here on a flat project. And then this one is called Call Me, where you make a little bag that you can carry your phone in, your business cards, your name tag for a show. So you learn to do several bindings. You do it on a zipper, on a vinyl pocket. You learn to do fold over elastic on a mesh pocket. And then you learn to make bias binding that makes your handle as well. And then the other one is called Easy Does It, and this makes a dimensional bag, so you learn how to bind on a dimensional project. And the main reason we designed this pattern is so that you can learn how to do this seam right here, and I'll explain some more about that in just a minute. But so this, you learn a little bit more steps. So I always tell people, if you're new to our patterns or if you're new to our techniques, go download these. They're all free patterns, and they all have videos that go from beginning to end, every step of the way. So if you work through those, and again, I'd start with this one, then I'd move to Peacekeeper, then to Call Me, do Easy Does It Last. You'll learn a ton of techniques, and binding won't be so fearful for you after that. We have all of our staff at work. They get a sewing class, and they sew for 2 hours every other week. And so that's where they start, and they're working through these. And I think most of them are at the stage where they're about ready to work on this one. And interestingly, one of them the other day said, I actually think the Call Me is the easiest. I think it was way easier than this one. And I said, only because you'd already done those, I think. I don't think if you had started with that one would have felt as easy to you. I mean, maybe it would have, but working through those in that order really helps. Let me tell you about this one. So this is a technique that I like to explain to people because there's a right way and a wrong way to do these. So I've got a couple samples here. And if you look at this one, this is how we normally do bindings. We will sew the binding down on our seam, and then we will fold it over and stitch along the edge. And if you do that on this bag, so this is like, well, it's like this strip. This is all one loop that gets joined to the front and the back to make that bag. If you do that, what you end up when you're ready to put your bag together is a big bump right there. You've got a piece that you've got to figure out how to deal with it when you sew that to the front of your bag. And what I often see when I'm teaching a class and people get ahead of me is that, they're paying so much attention to keeping these edges even with the front or back of the bag. And as they get to this, they just fold it whatever way they're stitching. So invariably they end up with this one stitched down this way. But when they do this side, they're going the way they're stitching, and you get that. And then not only do they have this big lump to deal with in their seams, but they also have this twisted seam there. So what I want you to do, instead of doing the seam like normal, like I explained earlier, is you take the same 2-inch piece of binding, and first you sew your 2 pieces of fabric together here. But then instead of just sewing a 1/4 inch seam on it, we do a 1/4 inch, and then we do 1/8 of an inch on each side of it. So by the time you're done, you've sewn an 1/8 inch seam, a 1/4 inch seam, and a 3/8 inch seam. If you look, I don't know if I have anything, but if you look at that, you can see how compressed that fabric is right there compared to the fabric right there. Every time you sew through Soft and Stable, it compresses it more. So extra lines of stitching really help to mash it down. So by sewing through that 3 times, I've mashed it down. And now you're going to take your binding, and as soon as you come around here, you're going to see I got to do something different because you don't have enough binding there to wrap around. So what you're going to do then is flatten that down against your side strip. And you always want to make sure that you sew first on the side where the zipper is, because you want to flatten it against this. You don't want to sew it on this side and flatten it against this, because then you're going to have stitching through your zipper. But I flatten that down. Grab my stiletto. And then I stitch along this edge to hold it down. And then I come along this edge, and then I go back along that edge. And when you're done, you have this look instead. So if you look at that, can you see how nice and flat that seam is in comparison? And see how easy that would be then to attach your front or your back of your bag to that? So
Wow.
those are little tips. So extra lines of stitching in the seam allowance help to mash it down. Accurate 1/4 inch seams on your final line of stitching. And something that's different if you're a quilter is usually if you're a quilter, you sew the binding on the back. No, you sew it on the front, and then you take it to the back so you can hand stitch it down because you want it to look the best on the front. When I'm doing bags, I don't want to do anything by hand. So I sew it on the back and then take it to the front because it's always going to look best on the front. The other thing is we use bias bindings anytime we have to go around a corner. And we always make our bias binding from a square of fabric. And here's a tip on that. We love to use stripes because they really I don't think I have anything here that has a stripe on it, but we do use them a lot. Oh, no, that's not stripes either. Anyway, it's fun to get that kind of candy cane effect going around your project. So we start with a square of fabric, and the pattern will tell you what size to do. But if you want to figure it out on your own, you basically need to figure how many inches of binding you need to go around your project on every piece that needs to be bound. And let's say that totals 144 inches. You find the square root of whatever that is, which is 12 inches, and that's the size that should give you the right amount of binding. I usually add a little bit to that so that people can square their piece up, but that's kind of a general rule of thumb. So you take your square and then you're going to cut it in half diagonally from corner to corner. Except I don't have a ruler handy, but you'd lay your ruler on there and cut it. Usually I don't, this is a pretty small square, but usually my ruler's not big enough to go from corner to corner. So here's a tip. If you fold this in half and make it into a triangle, you can align your ruler on here and get the edge even with your point here and make sure the lines on your ruler are straight across here and then cut it. And then you end up with the two triangles that you need. So there's one and here's the other. So you've got your two triangles, and then you're going to take those triangles and sew them together to make a parallelogram. The easiest way I have found to describe this is to turn one so that you have a mountain, which means the peak is at the top. And then I'm going to turn the other one and make a valley. So my peak is at the bottom. Now, here's a tip on stripes. If you sewed these together, it would be really easy to match your stripe and make sure that it's not visible. But when you get then to these sides, they might not line up right. So I always match this side first and make sure that I match every one of these stripes along here, even if I don't have my ends lined up exactly like they should for my little 1/4 inch dog ears. Because again, I always allow a little bit extra so you can trim it up if you need to. So I'll take this, I'll get those lined up. I fold my mountain over onto my valley or vice versa, one of them. Get those lined up, pin them along each one. And if you look at this, I was teaching at a class in Chicago and one of the ladies says, yeah, it looks like a pair of ladies' breeches. And someone else in the class said, yes, and you sew across the waist, not up the crotch. And it's like, that's always an easy way to remember how to sew it. So basically you're going to sew across here. And when you're done, you're going to end up with, I think I may have already trimmed some off of this, but we'll see. So you're going to end up with a piece that looks like this. You're going to press that seam open, and then you're going to have this nice long parallelogram, and you can see how nice my stripes match all the way across there. Then from this, you're going to cut your bias strips. And the secret on this is make sure you're cutting them on the bias edge, not on this edge. So I usually do this to make sure, okay, that's my bias edge. I can't tell you how many times I've been teaching classes and people have cut them this way. Well, all you have then is straight grain binding with a ton of seams in it. So don't do that. Make sure you're cutting on the bias edge. And again, even my 24-inch ruler is probably not going to be wide enough to stretch across here. So I can take this and fold it over so that this kind of follows my seam. I get the edges even here, the edges even here, and then I can cut my strips out. So I cut 2 1/4 inch for almost everything we do. Very occasionally we'll do a 2 1/2 inch binding, but for me, 2 1/4 inch is just perfect. I like a really tight binding because again, if we look back at this, see if there's anywhere on here where my binding is really loose. Let's say this looks a little bit loose to me right here. If I want it so that the folded edge is just past that line of stitching, if I have excess binding out here, it's not going to be filled with the soft and stable, and that's where I'm going to get wrinkles and it's going to look ugly. If I have to go too far, it's not going to be good. So I like it to be just exactly 2 1/4 because that math works out to account for the depth of my project. So the pattern will tell you sometimes it's different, but almost always that's what we use. So the other thing that I forgot to mention is once you get all your stripes cut out, then you're going to join those to make a continuous strip. And again, I like to match the stripes if I can. So what's this piece? Okay, here. So this is one thing that I love about Tula's fabrics is she makes her stripes exactly a ½ inch wide. So if I'd probably trim this one right here and trim that one right there, put them together and sew down the middle. You can't tell where my stripes are there either. So just a little trick, but you'll put these together. This took me forever to figure out when I first started. I couldn't figure out how to join them. I finally decided if I lay them out like what they're going to look like when I'm done and take this one and just turn it over right sides on top and line them up, then I can sew. Here's another secret. You want to have a 1/4 inch seam here and you want it to go from cleavage here to cleavage here. And if that's hard for you when you start, it is not cheating to mark a 1/4 inch seam allowance on here and make sure that that 1/4 inch is lined up with those 2 points and stitch along the line. Once you've done it a few times, it's easy to do, but it just takes a little bit of getting used to know where to line those up. But then you've got a long strip of binding, and I usually take it and pin it in half, roll it up, and when I'm ready to go, sew it on. We've done so many bindings that it's just kind of second nature to me, but I recommend just practicing.
Wow, I'm soaking in all the knowledge because, like Beth, my binding game is also very weak. And it just looks horrible. Every time I'm like, okay, I think I got it good this time. And I turn it around and I like missed spots here and you can see the stitching there. And I'm just like, forget it. So I'm definitely going to have to try out your patterns.
Yeah, basically make sure it's the right width. Make sure you sewed it on with the right seam allowance and don't be afraid to go back and refine that if you need to. And then as you pull it around, make sure that it's just past that line of stitching so that your line of stitching falls out in the same place. And again, don't forget, don't press it. Because if you turn this around, and this has been packed away so long, there's kind of a sharp crease in there. But if I turn this around and have creases and it's not even, all I have to do is take my fingers along here and kind of massage them, and those wrinkles just go away, and it's so much easier than to get a knife edge. A lot of people too will say, what do you do around corners? That's why most of our bags have rounded corners, because it's way easier to do a rounded edge. And again, one of the tools that I absolutely would not live without is my stiletto. And I take my stiletto, I position it where I want, I stitch to there, I move down another inch, say, okay, that needs to be right there, I stitch to there, that needs to be right there, I stitch to there, and I just work my way as I go. I can take this and pull it, further if it's almost there but not quite. I can really maneuver it to where it needs to be with this. So this is the best tool in the world.
So Beth, the one who brought up the question about binding, she comments, I am ready to perfect binding. You and me both, Beth. We got this.
You got this. And check out those free videos because there's a lot of tips in there. Everything that I just showed you, you can see with really good camera angles so you can see them up close and personal. And, just working through those. And they're useful little projects that don't take a ton of time, don't take a ton of supplies. So they're really fun to do. Be a great Thanksgiving weekend project.
Right, considering many of us are not going anywhere. So, which is fine with me. I'd rather stay home and sew anyway.
Amen. Amen. And again, if you just go to ByAnnie.com and click on patterns, you'll see like a category that says ByAnnie Basics. They're all there. And what you have to do is download them, or you have to buy them at $0. And then you also have to buy the video at $0. So you have to check out, put them in your cart, check out, and then they go into your digital library. So you have to be logged in to access them, but you just go to our website, click on the bottom where it says My Digital Library, and you'll find them all in there. Plus, we populate that with some of our other basic ones. Like we have a whole series on how to do zippers, how to make your zippers using zippers by the yard, how to make double slide zippers, all kinds of good stuff like that's in there too. So any of our patterns that have videos that go with them, when you buy the pattern, you get a coupon, so you get the video free, and those will also be in there. So you have one easy place to access all of that. And we work really, really hard on our videos. We obviously perfect the pattern, and then we spend, a week or so writing scripts, another few days filming, another several weeks editing, so that we've got B-roll in there showing all the steps. So they're really easy to follow and really helpful.
I'm so excited to take a look at them. You know what, Annie? I did not ask you or Trevor what your schedule looked like, so I don't want to be hogging up, your entire Friday evening.
I have no idea what time it is. My watch battery died yesterday, so.
All right, then we're going to keep going. No, I'm just kidding. It is 5:13 Eastern time, so 3:13 your time?
Yeah, Trevor usually leaves at 4, so long as we get him out of here, maybe in a half hour or so, I'm happy to keep talking as long as you need.
You hear that, Trevor? You're still ours for about 45 minutes. Okay.
Good.
So our next question is, what is the best advice you can give to a person who wants to start bag making?
Well, I was going to tell you, do the ByAnnie basics, because if you learn good techniques right off the bat, you're going to be so far ahead. It's so much easier to learn how to do it right than to learn how to do it wrong and have to change how you do it. So that's one of the things that I would do. The other thing I would say is practice, keep at it, don't be afraid, and don't be a perfectionist. I mean, you want to do good work, but if you beat yourself up on not being able to do it on the first project you make, you won't continue. So you're going to improve. Your skills are going to get better the more that you do it, and enjoy it more than anything. Is make it fun. Don't make it be a trial. And find somebody who would appreciate a little bag like this, and make it for one. I find that if I'm making something for a gift, I have to decide that before I ever start sewing, because otherwise it's way too hard to part with something that I've made. But if I decide, okay, I'm making this for my sister, this is going to be her birthday present, I think about her the whole time I'm sewing it, which just adds, to the level of enjoyment that you have. And, just do it. Also, have good tools. Don't um, don't scrimp on things. You don't need a ton of stuff, but you need a stiletto, you need a rotary cutter, you need a couple rulers, you need a cutting mat, you need a pair of scissors and snippers, and pins. You need some heavy duty quilting pins, you need some fine tip silk pins, and those are the basics. But get yourself set up with some of the basic tools, and if you can, set yourself up a space where you can sew. I'm really lucky because my husband, even from day one, knew that that was something important. Actually, when my husband and I got married, we were both in college. And when we graduated, I graduated with a degree in accounting. I was a CPA, and he graduated as a teacher. And we knew that it would be way easier for me to find a job than for him. So I basically said, you get a job and then I'll go. Well, he decided he wanted to move to Alaska. And of course, he didn't want to live in a big city. So we moved to Alaska out in the boondocks. And the thing I said to him is, that's fine. I can live anywhere so long as I have a sewing machine. So he always made sure that I had a sewing machine and a nice workspace. And, if you can leave things set up and have room to have a cutting table and, a place to pin, and that if you don't have room to have it set up, at least make it so that when you're ready to sew, it's easy. And if you can have a sewing machine in a cabinet so it's not up on the table and your arms are up around your shoulders, you're also going to enjoy it a whole lot more, because you're going to not be killing your body as you work.
Well, I think that speaks to just how much you love sewing, because I think it's going to take a lot more than just a sewing machine for my significant other to get me to move to Alaska.
Well, not only that, we moved to Alaska. We lived in a village that was 90% Tlingit Indian for the first year. And of course, they did not, it was a town of 1,000 people. They didn't need a CPA. So I was assistant bookkeeper at the high school, which was actually the best job I ever had. I loved doing that. I loved being involved with the students. Then we moved to a town where we had gone from a town where it rained 13, or a state where it rained 13 inches a year. We moved to a town where it rained 13 feet a year. So you
Oh,
definitely had to have a hobby. Then we moved to the Glacier Bay area and we homesteaded 160 acres. So we had no electricity for the first 3 years we were there. We had no running water. We used a water pump. We had an outhouse. I got pregnant a month after we moved there, which was definitely not in the plans. We we had to build roads, 2 miles of road, two bridges to even get into the property where we were going to build. So yeah, he definitely made sure I had a nice sewing machine and plenty of fabric.
you deserve that after all of that.
I did.
So we talk about, storage, having a space. How do you store your patterns?
I hmm, I most of them are on the computer, and when I'm ready to make another one, I just print the latest version of it. But once I do that, I usually put them in a sheet protector, and I tried keeping them in a notebook, but it was such a pain. I had too many. I had this many notebooks on my shelf, and which letter is in which one. I finally just took a drawer in a filing cabinet and I put hanging file folders in with ABC labels, and I just stick them in there. And I try really hard to keep them in alphabetical order because there's a lot of R patterns or a lot of S patterns, and you think it's not there. Well, it's just because it's in the wrong section of the alphabet. But that has worked well for me. And then when I get ready to sew, I take it out of the sheet protector. I try to print them so that they're only on one side of the page because I get confused if they're on both sides of the page. But then I put them on a little clipboard and I keep that with me as I sew, and I just put the page behind as I go so that I can work through it in order. That's one really, really, really important thing about ByAnnie patterns is that you want to follow the steps in order. I mean, anybody that makes a purse or bag knows that. On here, you can't put this pocket on first and then these because the lines of stitching attaching these are going to sew through this pocket. So all of our steps have little check boxes in front of them so that you can check them off as you do them, and that really helps if you get interrupted that you know where you were when you quit. But one tip that I learned when I was teaching in Australia a couple years ago, the lady put each page in a sheet protector so that she didn't have to write on it, and then she used a vis-a-vis marker to mark the check boxes on the sheet protector, and so she was able to keep track where she was without messing up her pattern, which I thought was really smart.
Oh, that is. And then she can just reuse it next time too.
Yep, she just wipes it off and goes again. So I tried lots of different ways with other patterns. I do have other patterns that I've bought for quilts and things, and I do those exactly the same way, but those I have more organized by category. So I'll have kid stuff or wearables or home deck, and those just go again, in the hanging file. And when I'm ready to, make something from that, I just go pull those out. And I have to admit that other people's patterns, like I said, I rarely get a chance to do them because I don't have time, but I don't mind at all. I just love looking at them and thinking about them and looking at the pictures, and that's fun too. Kind of like fabric, you know. I don't
Yes.
mind having a big stack of fabric. I don't care if I never use it because eventually, sometimes sometimes fabric brings you joy just by buying it and looking at it.
Yes. It's what is that saying that I've seen around? Buying fabric is a totally separate hobby than actually sewing the fabric.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So
We have a
speaking of
little bit
fabric,
different situation because we get fabric from fabric companies and we've committed, to help them market it. So it puts a little bit different pressure on it, which is not a bad thing because it ensures that we get things made with it. So when fabric comes in, we'll figure out all the things that we're going to make and assign them to people and make a list. And having a list that shows you all the things that you're planning to do makes it a lot easier to stay on track and not get sidetracked on other things.
okay, so do you have a good sewing book or resource that you would recommend?
I thought about that when you showed me that, and I don't know of any book that I use regularly that I refer to. I Again, it's because I kind of get stuck in my own little rut and I do my stuff. So if like if I need to look up a skill or a terminology, I probably just go on the internet and type it in and see all the options that come up as far as what's out there. I do have a book by Singer that's called Pillows, I think, that I've used a lot when I've tried to make cushions and things. It's got a lot of techniques in it for doing knife edge pillows and stuff like that. But as far as bag sewing, again, I stick pretty close to home. If
Well,
somebody
our
was
lovely
looking for
Samantha
something,
has her book, but
I would do the ByAnnie Basics.
Samantha has her book out, but I'm gonna call it now. Maybe you'll come out with a book soon. Nudge, nudge.
Nudge, nudge. Maybe, what I would love to do, and it's been on my list for probably 5 years, is a series of, I don't know about books so much as maybe videos, but a whole ByAnnie Basic series that's like pockets all the different ways, zippers all the different ways, bindings all the different ways, A to Z. And if you've got a pattern that uses this style, you can just go watch that video. So yeah, kind of a just basic series like that.
That would be amazing. So from Facebook, Shanova would like to know.
That it's full of things. In fact, I was really, when I watched your sew along video, there are so many things that are done differently than anything that I've ever done. So I'm looking forward to doing a little bit more exploring there. I'll probably learn all kinds of new techniques, take me in all kinds of new directions.
We're always learning, right?
That's for sure.
Okay, so Shanova would like to know if you sew barefoot, in just socks, or with shoes.
Shoes. I can't go barefoot hardly at all. I my ankles aren't strong enough or something, but I have shoes on all the time from the time I get dressed in the morning till I go to bed at night. So definitely shoes. Plus, when I was in about 5th grade, I was a sewer and I made clothes for my Barbies and dolls, and I did everything by hand, not everything by hand, but a lot by hand. And then I had carpet in my bedroom and dropped a needle and it broke off in my toe and I had to go to the
Oh,
hospital and have it cut out. And so part of it too is safety. And I've seen too many people drop rotary cutters and cut toes. So yeah, I wear shoes and
oh,
socks.
oh, that's horrible.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of our followers on Instagram wanted to know if there was any possibility of acrylic templates coming out for your patterns in the future.
That is, most of our patterns don't use templates. Most of our patterns are just, you use a rotary cutter, ruler to cut them, and they're just squares and rectangles. We do have a couple, for instance, Clam Up, that makes a little bags like this in several different sizes, and this one does have templates. Um, I have a set of acrylic templates that a friend made for me, but they were really expensive. And so for me, it's like, well, I don't know if anybody would pay the price for that. But who knows? Up until about 6 months or a year ago, no, not even that long, probably 6 months or maybe even less, we were extremely limited in size. When I started my business, I worked out of a closet, and well, not out of a closet, but everything I had would fit in a closet in the hall. And then I gradually expanded and pretty much took over a 3-car garage. And about 5 years ago, we moved into a 2,500 square foot warehouse. And I thought, oh my gosh, we'll never use all that space. Well, it was full the day we moved in because we had so much stuff, not only in the 3-car garage, but, throughout my house. And so then about 2 years ago, we moved into a 7,500 square foot warehouse and thought, oh, that's going to last us forever. Well, it wasn't long before my son was saying we cannot add a single more product because we have nowhere to put it. So I don't know, when was that, Trevor, that we moved? In April. So in April, we about did maybe 60% more space. So now finally we can add a few new products. So that's one that we might consider, but no real plans for it yet. If that's something you're interested in, shoot me an email or shoot an email to info@byannie.com and let us know which patterns you would be interested in templates for. But again, the vast majority of them, you cut a 6 by 9 inch rectangle, a 10.5 by 10 inch square. All of them can be done just with a rotary cutter and ruler. And then one thing that we do a lot is we round corners. And it's really important that you round the corners. Not on a project like this, it wouldn't matter what size you do, but on a project like this, where the side strip has to match that, it's really important that if I tell you to round that with a 2.5 inch circle, that's the size you use, not a 3.5 or 4.5, because your pieces won't fit. So we use these circles a whole lot to shape our pieces. Even on this bag, everything starts as a rectangle after you've got, which also makes it much easier to make. So like when you're ready to attach the pockets and the handles, you just measure from the outside edge using your ruler, a set amount. You draw lines so that you know you've got things centered and in exactly the right place. And then you mark some lines in a little bit from the top and you angle your ruler and cut it. And then you use the circle ruler to round the edges again so that you can put it together easily. So if you have, I would recommend a 12.5, maybe a 16.5, a 20.5 inch square ruler, a 6 by 24 inch ruler, and a set of these. Those are really the only templates you need for the very vast majority of our pattern. And we also include cutting layouts in the pattern that show you how to cut those out so that you make the best use of your quilted fabric and you're not wasting it, outside edges and things.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
I'm sorry. Do you prefer pins or wonder clips when you're sewing and putting your projects together?
Wonder clips whenever there's an edge that I can wonder clip. I think a rotary cutter was the best invention, followed by wonder clips and ByAnnie stiletto and pressing tool. And I'm not sure, rotary cutter I definitely would not live without, but wonder clips in this, probably wonder clips more than this, because the only time I really use pins, I use pins to mark centers on pieces so I can line them up, because I find that most fabrics, it's really hard to see a mark that you make. I use pins on my bindings, but those are on the edge and easy to avoid. But other than that, a wonder clip just holds everything together so well, and I don't get poked. I can't tell you how many times we've filmed a video and I catch myself on a pin somewhere, and the next scene I've got a Band-Aid around that finger because I tore my finger open. I really don't love pins. But sometimes you have to use them because you're pinning something inside where you can't put a wonder clip. Have you discovered the Sew Tight magnets? Don't know if I have any back here, but there's a company called Sew Tights that make what they call magnetic pins. So it's 2 pins and you can use those to hold your stuff together. They have a new one called So Tights HD, which stands for heavy duty. And when we did the A Place for Everything bag, that was really helpful when you put those pockets on, because sometimes like here, when you do this pocket, you can pin it here, but you can't pin it here, and you can't pin it here, and you can't pin it here, especially if it's made out of vinyl. So those magnets you could put between the layers, and even though you have a couple layers of soft and stable, they still held really well. So the regular duty ones I didn't find are strong enough if you've got soft and stable, but the HD ones work really well for that.
So soft and stable, can you kind of tell me how that came about? I mean, I just had my first experience with it, and I love it so much more than the foam that I've been using already. I'm like, I don't even want to use that other stuff anymore.
Yeah, I agree. Soft and stable is the best there is. So soft and stable came about because one of my very first patterns when I started doing patterns 20 years ago was a pattern I called Annie's Favorite Purses. And we still sell it. There's 2 sizes of purse in the pattern. And I modeled it after a Vera Bradley bag that I had that I loved. And when that bag wore out, I thought, I'm not buying another bag. I can make one. And so I tried to figure out how they did it. And I got really close, kind of reverse engineering what pieces to go where and how to put it together. But when I finished that bag, I was so disappointed because my Vera Bradley bag stood up, held its shape. I could open it, see what was in it, and it stood there. And my purse that I made myself was floppy. It just kept falling down. And at the time, I was mostly doing quilts. And so I had used a quilt batting that I had, and, it wasn't the same. And, I started looking at it and trying to figure out what the heck I had done wrong. And I finally decided, okay, it's what I used on the inside. And the bag started to wear out, and I could see they had used foam in it. And I thought, well, that must be what made the difference. So I went to the stores, and I was living here in St. George at the time, and we had a lot of quilting stores and fabric stores and, different stores that carried those types of supplies. But not a single store I went in had foam that would work for that. So I could find the narrowest foam I could find was like a half an inch. But if I tried sewing, it was just foam. And if I tried sewing it together, first of all, it was really hard because it was really thick. And when I got done, my piece looked, if I tried quilting it, it looked like the Michelin Man because it was so big and fluffy. And then I found more of a stiff foam like they use for sun visors and things, but again, you couldn't sew through it. So then I found Peltex, or I don't remember, but the heavy craft type interfacing, and that gave my bag really nice, stand up ability. But as soon as I turned a bag inside out or, maneuvered it in any way, it wrinkled, and there was no way I could get rid of the wrinkles. So I finally found something that was designed to go in the headliner of cars called headliner foam. And I tried making a bag or a purse with that. And I had really good success with that. And I thought, here we go, this will work. Well, it was a softer foam. It had a fabric lining on one side. And my problem with it was I had to be really, really, really careful when I was quilting with it, because if on the side that had the fabric, it would hug my fabric that I put next to it. It wouldn't move around, but on the other side, it didn't. And so my fabric would slide on the other side, I'd get wrinkles, and it was not a very good quality foam. So I used that for 2 or 3 years, and I finally decided I need something better, and there's nothing out there, so I'm going to go find somebody to make it for me. And so I spent several months with several different manufacturers, sending samples back and forth, telling them what I wanted, trying what they sent me. And that's how Soft and Stable was born. So the things that I told them is, first of all, I want a much better quality foam. I want something that's going to last and really be sturdy and stable. Soft and Stable our headliner foam was really stretchy. And if I was quilting a big piece, it didn't matter how flat and straight I held it. When I got to the end, I had a bolt because the sides would lift up and I just couldn't keep it straight and flat. Soft and Stable lays flat, and you can get done quilting and you have a perfectly flat piece, which is fabulous. And I also said I want fabric on both sides of the foam, and I want them to be really softly napped, because I had used fusible versions of batting and ruined more than one project, because either my iron wasn't hot enough and it didn't stick, or my iron was too hot and it bubbled. And I thought, I don't want to deal with fusible at all. I want to avoid that like the plague. I want something that I can just sew around the edges. And so Soft and Stable is designed so that you don't have to quilt it at all. You can throw a piece of Soft and Stable in the washer. It's going to come out in one piece, just like it went in. It's not going to shrink. You get a little bit of shrinking when you quilt, just because you're sewing a lot of layers, but it just works really well. So I finally decided, okay, this is it. This is everything that I want. And the gentleman that I was working with said, you're going to have to order 1,000 yards of this. And I kind of gulped, because that was kind of a lot. And I thought, well, I got to do it. And so I looked at because I had been buying headliner foam and selling it on my website. My problem was I couldn't buy it at a price that I could afford to sell it to stores. And so I was calling for it in my patterns, but stores couldn't get it. People couldn't get it. And that was really annoying to people. So I thought that was the other reason. I thought I got to find somebody to make it for me and fix what I don't like. So I kind of looked at my records, and I'd sold about 1,000 yards of the headliner foam in the year before. And I thought, well, if it lasts a year, it lasts a year. And that's okay. Well, at the time, my husband was in Idaho. We had, or Montana, I don't know. He wasn't here. And we had this shipment scheduled to come in, and I knew this, big semi couldn't come to my house in a residential neighborhood. So I live in the same town where Superior Threads is, and I'd done shows with them for quite a while. And so I called Bob and I said, would I be able to have this delivered to your dock? And he said, sure. So I get a call on Friday afternoon, 4:45, and they said, your shipment's here. Great. Well, I get there, and of course, they had all left for the weekend, and this 1,000 yards of Soft and Stable, which are wrapped in 50-yard rolls, which weigh about 50 pounds and stand 60 inches tall, so they're the same height as me, are laying out on the dock, and everybody's gone, and now it's my responsibility to get those to my house, which is about a 5 to 10 minute drive away. And all I had was a little Isuzu pickup that would hold 3 rolls max at a time. So I ferried them back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, finally got them in my garage, and my car had to sleep outside because my entire 3-car garage was filled with these rolls of Soft and Stable. Well, the next Monday, I called my hairdresser, who had a 18-year-old son, and I said, could Alex come help me on Monday? I've got this roll of all this Soft and Stable, and I was going to market like in 3 weeks, and I needed to get it packed and ready to ship. And she said, sure. So Alex came over and helped me carry them one at a time, all the way up the stairs to my sewing room. My cutting table in my sewing room still has grooves on it, because he didn't realize that you have to have a mat completely under it when you cut with a rotary cutter. So he helped me cut, and we'd cut all day long, and then he'd leave and I'd fold all night long. And I was used to going to shows with a box of patterns, like this big, that would be a show's worth of inventory. And it was heavy, but it was compact and little. It didn't take up a lot of room. Well, I had Soft and Stable, which is light and bulky, all through my house. The halls were full. The bedrooms were full. The dining room was full. I had all these boxes. And I remember calling my husband that night and saying, I have made the biggest mistake. This is not what I expected. And bless his heart, he was really kind and understanding. And he said, I'll be home in a week. We'll rent a storage unit. I'll build some tables so we can get it cut, and we'll make this work. He was really excited about the prospect of it. So he did, and we got it all going. We went to market, and it was like the hot thing, because nothing like that existed at the time. Soft and Stable was the very first one that came out. And it didn't take long before people were copying it, because it revolutionized bag making. But we got to the show. I had to decide. I asked Bob, okay, what do I do? Because we were almost out of all the inventory that I had taken for both market and festival within just, the first day or two of market. And so he said, sell it to the stores. You want to get it in the stores. Don't worry so much about the retail. So we saved enough so that we would have something to show at the second, at the retail show. We sold out, and that 1,000 yards of soft and stable was gone within less than a month. And, now we bring in semi-truckloads of it on a regular basis. So if you haven't tried it, do try it. There's nothing like it. Nobody else has managed to copy it.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I've tried headliner foam, I've tried a bunch of different Pellon ones, and it's not the same. Like the feel of it is just completely different. Even if you just hold one in one hand and one in the other without even like stretching it out or anything, you can feel the like weight and the density is completely different.
It's the best quality foam and the best quality fabric on it that's out there. It's ideal.
Okay, Annie, so
I
I
saw
think
my
we
making signs. Are we running out of time?
It's the camera. I'm only seeing half of it.
Oh.
So most of our video has been probably seeing my shoes.
Oh.
No, I think I saw most of Annie, maybe from her nose down until you adjusted it a
Oh,
couple
okay.
of ago. So well, at least I got a pretty good view, not of your shoes. Don't worry if you didn't wear your good shoes. But I was saying that I think we are at time so that we can get you both out of there at a good hour. But thank you so much for all of your time. I appreciate all of your advice, especially with the binding. I know I'm going to run off to your website and go look at that as soon as we get off.
And yeah, check those out. And if you ever have any questions on any of our stuff, we have a great customer service group who make all of our patterns, and they're really great at answering them. You can email me if they can't. And we're really happy. We want you to be successful. We want this to be fun. So yeah, give us a try, check us out, and have fun sewing those Lola bags. That is looking fabulous. And I'm gonna maybe make some time. Usually on the weekend when I'm sewing at home, I turn on, a video or a podcast, and I'm not always watching it. A lot of times I'm just listening it, but a lot of times my nose is right up next to the screen watching it. So I'm going to put those on and see what new techniques I can learn.
All right, wonderful.
So
thank you so much, and have a good night.
All right, let's do this again.
Absolutely.